All right, let's jump right into this explainer on Austin Kleon's totally refreshing methodology. Now, this is designed specifically for anyone who breaks out in a cold sweat at the mere thought of self-promotion. If you've ever felt like your work is just entirely invisible, but the idea of putting yourself out there makes you cringe, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to look at a completely different, much more approachable way to actually get discovered. And this quote from John Cleese perfectly sets the stage for our journey today, because we are going to completely reframe how you operate as creator. See, we tend to think of creativity as this magical, innate gift. You either have it or you don't, right? But if we shift our mindset to view it simply as a way of operating, a process that literally anyone can adopt, it suddenly becomes so much more accessible. It's really about changing your daily habits, not just waiting around to be bestowed with genius. Because let's face a universal pain point here. As Honoré de Balzac put it, the great problem for artists is how to actually get noticed. We all secretly, or maybe not so secretly, hate self-promotion. We completely loathe the idea of turning into human spam. But we still face that massive hurdle of getting our work seen, finding an audience, and, actually making a living or an impact. So the absolutely crucial question becomes this. How do you get noticed and find an audience if you despise traditional networking? If handing out business cards at some awkward mixer makes you want to hide under a table, how do you make yourself findable? Steve Martin famously said, "Be so good they can't ignore you." And yeah, sure, you have to focus on getting really good, but people won't just magically find you. You have to actively build findability right into your process.
Which brings us to part 1, rethinking self-promotion.
Instead of hoarding your work in absolute secrecy and wasting time schmoozing at cocktail parties, the most successful people simply share their ongoing process. They're cranking away in their studios or their cubicles, but they're totally open about it. They consistently post bits and pieces of their work, their ideas, and what they're learning online. They invite the network to learn alongside them. I mean, imagine if your next boss or client didn't even need to read a resume because they already follow your blog. You're taking advantage of the network instead of forcing yourself to do that gross networking. But to truly start sharing this way, we have to tackle part 2, the lone genius myth.
You know the classic, intimidating bust of Beethoven. The myth tells us that an individual with superhuman talents just appears out of nowhere, entirely free of influences, with this direct connection to divine inspiration. When it strikes like a lightning bolt, this genius toils away in a studio, shaping an idea into a masterpiece that's released to great fanfare. It essentially frames creativity as this antisocial act, performed only by superhuman historical figures. So here's the crucial point. If you buy into that intimidating myth, it completely validates why you're afraid to share. You feel like you just have to stand around in awe and gawk at the achievements of people like Mozart, Einstein, or Picasso. It makes you feel like, well, because you aren't a divine master yet, your work isn't worthy of being seen. It is a massive barrier to putting yourself out there. All right, cue the huge sigh of relief. Let's pivot to part 3, finding your scenius. This is a concept from musician Brian Eno that just completely shatters this myth. Instead of the lone genius, Brian Eno suggests we look for a scenius. This is the reality that creativity is actually an ecology. It's a collaborative network of artists, curators, thinkers, where a mind is deeply, fundamentally connected to other minds. Good work is almost never created in a vacuum. History's great figures weren't actually working in isolation at all. When we map out their relationships, we see they were part of highly active scenes. They were supporting each other, looking at each other's work, copying from each other, and stealing ideas. And honestly, this doesn't take away from their achievements. It just grounds them in reality. Creativity is always, in some sense, a collaboration. And what I absolutely love about scenius is that it makes room for the rest of us. You don't need to consider yourself a literal genius to be a valuable part of a scenius. It's all about what you have to contribute. Today, the internet is basically a massive collection of virtual sceniuses, with absolutely no bouncers and no gatekeepers. You don't need a fancy resume to belong. You just have to show up, share what you're learning, make quality connections, and start asking what you can contribute to others. This brings us to another huge roadblock. Part 4, the power of amateurs.
I absolutely love this quote from Charlie Chaplin. We're all so terrified of being revealed as amateurs, but the word amateur actually comes from French, and it literally means a lover. Someone who pursues their work purely in the spirit of love, completely regardless of fame or money.
And frankly, amateurs often have a distinct advantage over professionals because they have very little to lose.
It's a really stark contrast. Zen monk Shunryu Suzuki noted that in the expert's mind, there are very few possibilities, but in the beginner's or amateur's mind, there are many. Amateurs are wide open, enthusiastic, lifelong learners. They aren't afraid to make mistakes or look totally ridiculous in public. As C.S. Lewis pointed out, sometimes two schoolboys can help each other way better than a master can, because the fellow pupil has recently met the difficulty, whereas the expert met it so long ago they've totally forgotten the struggle.
Take blackout poetry, for example. It's unpolished, it's super messy, but it is deeply creative. Amateurs have the advantage because they just lack fear. They embrace the uncertainty, like Radiohead's Tom York, who apparently picks up an instrument he doesn't even know how to play when his songwriting feels stale. Amateurs will use whatever tools they have to make something. They know that doing even a mediocre something is vastly better than doing nothing at all. And honestly, watching an amateur at work often teaches us more than an expert can, because their raw enthusiasm is deeply, wildly contagious. When someone is just reasonably average but pays incredibly close attention to something they're obsessed with, like David Foster Wallace observed, it's just fascinating to watch. It inspires us to attempt the work ourselves. You see someone having fun making something, and you instantly think, hey, I want to get up and do that too. So, if we know you don't need to be a solitary genius or a flawless expert, what is actually stopping you? Let's hit part 5, finding your voice. The biggest excuse left is usually, well, I haven't found my voice yet. You might think you can't share a single thing until you find your perfectly unique voice. But the absolute crucial point here is that finding your voice is the result of sharing, not a prerequisite for it. You can't think your way into a voice, you have to work your way into it. So let's look at how to actually unlock it. First, stop worrying about whether you have a voice. Just accept that it is already hardwired into you. All you have to do is start talking out loud about the things you absolutely love and obsess over. Share your process. Let people learn from your successes and your failures. Show them the messy middle. As you continuously put yourself out there and contribute to your scenius, your distinct voice will naturally emerge and follow. And that brings us to the end of this explainer. I'm going to leave you with this final vital question to carry with you. Now that you have full permission to stop hiding, to totally forget about being a genius, and to joyfully embrace your amateur status, what are you going to share today? The world is waiting for your contribution. Go get out there and show your work.